Glossary 1. Inclusions and exclusions. This glossary includes terms that are unique or nearly unique to project management, for example, project scope statement, work package, work breakdown structure, critical path method. Not unique to project management, but used differently or with a narrower meaning in project management than in general everyday usage, for example, early start date. This glossary generally does not include application area specific terms. Terms used in project management that do not differ in any material way from everyday use, for example, calendar day, delay. Compound terms whose meaning is clear from the meanings of the component parts. Variance when the meaning of the variant is clear from the base term. Terms that are used only once and are not critical to understanding the point of the sentence. This can include a list of examples that would not have each term defined in the glossary. 2. Common acronyms. AC. Actual cost. BAC. Budgeted completion. CCB. Change Control Board. COQ. Cost of quality. CPAF. Cost plus award fee. CPFF. Cost plus fixed fee. CPI. Cost performance index. CPIF. Cost plus incentive fee. CPM. Critical path method. CV. Cost variance. EAC. Estimate at completion. EF. Early finish date. ES. Early start date. ETC. Estimate to complete. EV. Earned value. EVM. Earned value management. FF. Finish to finish. FFP. Firm fixed price. FPEPA. Fixed price with economic price adjustment. FPIF. Fixed price incentive fee. FS. Finish to start. IFB. Invitation for bid. LF. Late finish date. LOE. Level of effort. LS. Late start date. OBS. Organizational breakdown structure. PDM. Precedence diagramming method. PMBOK. Project management body of knowledge. PV. Planned value. QFD. Quality function deployment. RACI. Responsible, accountable, consult, and inform. RAM. Responsibility assignment matrix. RBS. Risk breakdown structure. RFI. Request for information. RFP. Request for proposal. RFQ. Request for quotation. SF. Start to finish. SOW. Statement of work. SPI. Schedule performance index. SS. Start to start. SV. Schedule variance. SWOT. Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. T&M. Time and material contract. WBS. Work breakdown structure. VAC. Variance at completion. 3. Definitions. Many of the words defined here have broader, and in some cases different, dictionary definitions. In some cases, a single glossary term consists of multiple words, for example, root cause analysis. Acceptance criteria. A set of conditions that is required to be met before deliverables are accepted. Accepted deliverables. Products, results, or capabilities produced by a project and validated by the project customer or sponsors as meeting their specified acceptance criteria. Accuracy. Within the quality management system, accuracy is an assessment of correctness. Acquire resources. The process of obtaining team members, facilities, equipment, materials, supplies, and other resources necessary to complete project work. Acquisition. Obtaining human and material resources necessary to perform project activities. Acquisition implies a cost of resources, and is not necessarily financial. Activity. A distinct, scheduled portion of work performed during the course of a project. Activity attributes. Multiple attributes associated with each schedule activity that can be included within the activity list. Activity attributes include activity codes, predecessor activities, successor activities, logical relationships, leads and lags, resource requirements, imposed dates, constraints, and assumptions. Activity duration. The time in calendar units between the start and finish of a schedule activity. See also duration. Activity duration estimates. the quantitative assessments of the likely number of time periods that are required to complete an activity. Activity list. A documented tabulation of schedule activities that shows the activity description, activity identifier, and a sufficiently detailed scope of work description so project team members understand what work is to be performed. Activity on node, AN. See precedence diagramming method, PDM. Actual cost, AC. The realized cost incurred for the work performed on an activity during a specific time period. Actual duration. The time in calendar units between the actual start date of the schedule activity and either the data date of the project's schedule if the schedule activity is in progress or the actual finish date if the schedule activity is complete. Adaptive life cycle. A project life cycle that is iterative or incremental. Affinity diagrams. A technique that allows large numbers of ideas to be classified into groups for review and analysis. Agreements. Any document or communication that defines the initial intentions of a project. This can take the form of a contract, memorandum of understanding, MOU, letters of agreement, verbal agreements, email, etc. Alternative analysis. A technique used to evaluate identified options in order to select the options or approaches to use to execute and perform the work of the project. Analogous estimating. A technique for estimating the duration or cost of an activity or a project using historical data from a similar activity or project. Analytical techniques. Various techniques used to evaluate, analyze, or forecast potential outcomes based on possible variations of project or environmental variables and their relationships with other variables. Assumption. A factor in the planning process that is considered to be true, real, or certain, without proof or demonstration. Assumption log. A project document used to record all assumptions and constraints throughout the project life cycle. Attribute sampling. Method of measuring quality that consists of noting the presence, or absence, of some characteristic, attribute, in each of the units under consideration. Authority. The right to apply project resources, expend funds, make decisions, or give approvals. Backward pass. A critical path method technique for calculating the late start and late finish dates by working backward through the schedule model from the project end date. Bar chart. A graphic display of schedule-related information. In the typical bar chart, schedule activities or work breakdown structure components are listed down the left side of the chart, dates are shown across the top, and activity durations are shown as date-placed horizontal bars. See also Gantt chart. Baseline. The approved version of a work product that can be changed only through formal change control procedures and is used as a basis for comparison to actual results. Basis of estimates. Supporting documentation outlining the details used in establishing project estimates such as assumptions, constraints, level of detail, ranges, and confidence levels. Benchmarking. Benchmarking is the comparison of actual or planned products, processes, and practices to those of comparable organizations to identify best practices, generate ideas for improvement, and provide a basis for measuring performance. Benefits management plan. The documented explanation defining the processes for creating, maximizing, and sustaining the benefits provided by a project or program. Bid documents. All documents used to solicit information, quotations, or proposals from prospective sellers. Bidder conference. The meetings with prospective sellers prior to the preparation of a bid or proposal to ensure all prospective vendors have a clear and common understanding of the procurement. Also known as contractor conferences, vendor conferences, or pre-bid conferences. Bottom-up estimating. A method of estimating project duration or cost by aggregating the estimates of the lower-level components of the work breakdown structure, WBS. Budget. The approved estimate for the project or any work breakdown structure component or any schedule activity. Budgeted completion, BAC. The sum of all budgets established for the work to be performed. Buffer. C reserve. Business case. A documented economic feasibility study used to establish validity of the benefits of a selected component lacking sufficient definition and that is used as a basis for the authorization of further project management activities. Business value. The net quantifiable benefit derived from a business endeavor. The benefit may be tangible, intangible, or both. Cause and effect diagram. A decomposition technique that helps trace an undesirable effect back to its root cause. Change. A modification to any formally controlled deliverable, project management plan component, or project document. Change control. A process whereby modifications to documents, deliverables, or baselines associated with the project are identified, documented, approved, or rejected. Change Control Board, CCB. A formally chartered group responsible for reviewing, evaluating, approving, delaying, or rejecting changes to the project, and for recording and communicating such decisions. Change Control System. A set of procedures that describes how modifications to the project deliverables and documentation are managed and controlled. Change Control Tools. Manual or automated tools to assist with change and/or configuration management. At a minimum, the tools should support the activities of the CCB. Change Log. A comprehensive list of changes submitted during the project and their current status. Change Management Plan. A component of the project management plan that establishes the Change Control Board, documents the extent of its authority, and describes how the change control system will be implemented. Change Request. A formal proposal to modify a document, deliverable, or baseline. Charter. See Project Charter. Checklist Analysis. A technique for systematically reviewing materials using a list for accuracy and completeness. Check Sheets. A tally sheet that can be used as a checklist when gathering data. Claim. A request, demand, or assertion of rights by a seller against a buyer, or vice versa, for consideration, compensation, or payment under the terms of a legally binding contract, such as for a disputed change. Claims Administration. The process of processing, adjudicating, and communicating contract claims. Close project or phase. The process of finalizing all activities for the project, phase, or contract. Closing process group. The processes performed to formally complete or close a project, phase, or contract. Code of accounts. A numbering system used to uniquely identify each component of the work breakdown structure, WBS. Collect requirements. The process of determining, documenting, and managing stakeholder needs and requirements to meet project objectives. Collocation. An organizational placement strategy where the project team members are physically located close to one another in order to improve communication, working relationships, and productivity. Communication methods. A systematic procedure, technique, or process used to transfer information among project stakeholders. Communication models. A description, analogy, or schematic used to represent how the communication process will be performed for the project. Communication requirements analysis. An analytical technique to determine the information needs of the project stakeholders through interviews, workshops, study of lessons learned from previous projects, etc. Communications management plan. A component of the project, program, or portfolio management plan that describes how, when, and by whom information about the project will be administered and disseminated. Communication styles assessment. A technique to identify the preferred communication method, format, and content for stakeholders for planned communication activities. Communication technology. Specific tools, systems, computer programs, etc., used to transfer information among project stakeholders. Conduct procurements. The process of obtaining seller responses, selecting a seller, and awarding a contract. Configuration management plan. A component of the project management plan that describes how to identify and account for project artifacts under configuration control, and how to record and report changes to them. Configuration management system. A collection of procedures used to track project artifacts and monitor and control changes to these artifacts. Conformance. Within the quality management system, conformance is a general concept of delivering results that fall within the limits that define acceptable variation for a quality requirement. Constraint. A limiting factor that affects the execution of a project, program, portfolio, or process. Context diagrams. A visual depiction of the product scope showing a business system, process, equipment, computer system, etc., and how people and other systems, actors, interact with it. Contingency. An event or occurrence that could affect the execution of the project that may be accounted for with a reserve. Contingency reserve. Time or money allocated in the schedule or cost baseline for known risks with active response strategies. Contingent response strategies. Responses provided which may be used in the event that a specific trigger occurs. Contract. A contract is a mutually binding agreement that obligates the seller to provide the specified product or service or result and obligates the buyer to pay for it. Contract change control system. The system used to collect, track, adjudicate, and communicate changes to a contract. Control. Comparing actual performance with planned performance, analyzing variances, assessing trends to effect process improvements, evaluating possible alternatives, and recommending appropriate corrective action as needed. Control account. A management control point where scope, budget, actual cost, and schedule are integrated and compared to earned value for performance measurement. Control chart. A graphic display of process data over time and against established control limits, which has a centerline that assists in detecting a trend of plotted values toward either control limit. Control costs. The process of monitoring the status of the project to update the project costs and manage changes to the cost baseline. Control limits. The area composed of 3 standard deviations on either side of the centerline or mean of a normal distribution of data plotted on a control chart, which reflects the expected variation in the data. See also specification limits. Control procurements. The process of managing procurement relationships, monitoring contract performance, making changes and corrections as appropriate, and closing out contracts. Control quality. The process of monitoring and recording results of executing the quality management activities to assess performance and ensure the project outputs are complete, correct, and meet customer expectations. Control resources. The process of ensuring that the physical resources assigned and allocated to the project are available as planned, as well as monitoring the planned versus actual utilization of resources and performing corrective action as necessary. Control schedule. The process of monitoring the status of the project to update the project schedule and manage changes to the schedule baseline. Control scope. The process of monitoring the status of the project and product scope and managing changes to the scope baseline. Corrective action. An intentional activity that realigns the performance of the project work with the project management plan. Cost aggregation. Summing the lower-level cost estimates associated with the various work packages for a given level within the project's WBS or for a given cost control account. Cost baseline. The approved version of the time-phased project budget, excluding any management reserves, which can be changed only through formal change control procedures and is used as a basis for comparison to actual results. Cost-benefit analysis. A financial analysis tool used to determine the benefits provided by a project against its costs. Cost management plan. A component of a project or program management plan that describes how costs will be planned, structured, and controlled. Cost of quality, COQ. All costs incurred over the life of the product by investment in preventing non-conformance to requirements, appraisal of the product or service for conformance to requirements, and failure to meet requirements. Cost Performance Index, CPI. A measure of the cost efficiency of budgeted resources expressed as the ratio of earned value to actual cost. Cost Plus Award Fee Contract, CPAF. A category of contract that involves payments to the seller for all legitimate actual costs incurred for completed work, plus an award fee representing seller profit. Cost Plus Fixed Fee Contract, CPFF. A type of cost reimbursable contract where the buyer reimburses the seller for the seller's allowable costs. Allowable costs are defined by the contract, plus a fixed amount of profit, fee. Cost Plus Incentive Fee Contract, CPIF. A type of cost reimbursable contract where the buyer reimburses the seller for the seller's allowable costs. Allowable costs are defined by the contract, and the seller earns its profit if it meets defined performance criteria. Cost Reimbursable Contract. A type of contract involving payment to the seller for the seller's actual costs, plus a fee typically representing the seller's profit. Cost Variance, CV. The amount of budget deficit or surplus at a given point in time, expressed as the difference between the earned value and the actual cost. Crashing. A technique used to shorten the schedule duration for the least incremental cost by adding resources. Create WBS. The process of subdividing project deliverables and project work into smaller, more manageable components. Criteria. Standards, rules, or tests on which a judgment or decision can be based or by which a product, service, result, or process can be evaluated. Critical path. The sequence of activities that represents the longest path through a project, which determines the shortest possible duration. Critical path activity. Any activity on the critical path in a project schedule. Critical path method, CPM. A method used to estimate the minimum project duration and determine the amount of schedule flexibility on the logical network paths within the schedule model. Data. Discrete, unorganized, unprocessed measurements or raw observations. Data analysis techniques. Techniques used to organize, assess, and evaluate data and information. Data date. A point in time when the status of the project is recorded. Data gathering techniques. Techniques used to collect data and information from a variety of sources. Data representation techniques. Graphic representations or other methods used to convey data and information. Decision-making techniques. Techniques used to select a course of action from different alternatives. Decision tree analysis. A diagramming and calculation technique for evaluating the implications of a chain of multiple options in the presence of uncertainty. Decomposition. A technique used for dividing and subdividing the project scope and project deliverables into smaller, more manageable parts. Defect. An imperfection or deficiency in a project component where that component does not meet its requirements or specifications and needs to be either repaired or replaced. Defect repair. An intentional activity to modify a non-conforming product or product component. Define activities. The process of identifying and documenting the specific actions to be performed to produce the project deliverables. Define scope. The process of developing a detailed description of the project and product. Deliverable. Any unique and verifiable product, result, or capability to perform a service that is required to be produced to complete a process, phase, or project. Dependency. See a logical relationship. Determine budget. The process of aggregating the estimated costs of individual activities or work packages to establish an authorized cost baseline. Development approach. The method used to create and evolve the product, service, or result during the project life cycle, such as predictive, iterative, incremental, agile, or a hybrid method. Develop project charter. The process of developing a document that formally authorizes the existence of a project and provides the project manager with the authority to apply organizational resources to project activities. Develop project management plan. The process of defining, preparing, and coordinating all plan components and consolidating them into an integrated project management plan. Develop schedule. The process of analyzing activity sequences, durations, resource requirements, and schedule constraints to create the project schedule model for project execution and the monitoring and controlling. Develop team. The process of improving competencies, team member interaction, and overall team environment to enhance project performance. Diagramming techniques. Approaches to presenting information with logical linkages that aid in understanding. Direct and manage project work. The process of leading and performing the work defined in the project management plan and implementing approved changes to achieve the project's objectives. Discrete effort. An activity that can be planned and measured and that yields a specific output. Note, discrete effort is one of 3 earned value management, EVM, types of activities used to measure work performance, discretionary dependency. A relationship that is established based on knowledge of best practices within a particular application area or an aspect of the project where a specific sequence is desired. Documentation reviews. The process of gathering a corpus of information and reviewing it to determine accuracy and completeness. Duration. The total number of work periods required to complete an activity or work breakdown structure component, expressed in hours, days, or weeks. Contrast with effort. Early finish date. In the critical path method, the earliest possible point in time when the uncompleted portions of a schedule activity can finish based on the schedule network logic, the data date, and any schedule constraints. Early start date, S. In the critical path method, the earliest possible point in time when the uncompleted portions of a schedule activity can start based on the schedule network logic, the data date, and any schedule constraints. Earned value, F. The measure of work performed expressed in terms of the budget authorized for that work. Earned value management. A methodology that combines scope, schedule, and resource measurements to assess project performance and progress. Effort. The number of labor units required to complete a schedule activity or work breakdown structure component, often expressed in hours, days, or weeks. Contrast with duration. Emotional intelligence. The ability to identify, assess, and manage the personal emotions of oneself and other people, as well as the collective emotions of groups of people. Enterprise environmental factors. Conditions, not under the immediate control of the team, that influence, constrain, or direct the project, program, or portfolio. Estimate. A quantitative assessment of the likely amount or outcome of a variable, such as project costs, resources, effort, or durations. Estimate activity durations. The process of estimating the number of work periods needed to complete individual activities with the estimated resources. Estimate activity resources. The process of estimating team resources and the type and quantities of material, equipment, and supplies necessary to perform project work. Estimate at completion, EAC. The expected total cost of completing all work expressed as the sum of the actual cost to date and the estimate to complete. Estimate costs. The process of developing an approximation of the monetary resources needed to complete project work. Estimate to complete, etc. The expected cost to finish all the remaining project work. Execute. Directing, managing, performing, and accomplishing the project work, providing the deliverables and providing work performance information. Executing process group. Those processes performed to complete the work defined in the project management plan to satisfy the project requirements. Expert judgment. Judgment provided based upon expertise in an application area, knowledge area, discipline, industry, etc., as appropriate for the activity being performed. Such expertise may be provided by any group or person with specialized education, knowledge, skill, experience, or training. Explicit knowledge. Knowledge that can be codified using symbols such as words, numbers, and pictures. External dependency. A relationship between project activities and non-project activities. Fallback plan. Fallback plans include an alternative set of actions and tasks available in the event that the primary plan needs to be abandoned because of issues, risks, or other causes. Fast tracking. A schedule compression technique in which activities or phases normally done in sequence are performed in parallel for at least a portion of their duration. Fee. Represents profit as a component of compensation to a seller. Finish date. A point in time associated with a schedule activity's completion. Usually qualified by one of the following: actual, planned, estimated, scheduled, early, late, baseline, target, or current. Finish to finish, FF. A logical relationship in which a successor activity cannot finish until a predecessor activity has finished. Finish to start, FS. A logical relationship in which a successor activity cannot start until a predecessor activity has finished. Firm fixed price contract, FFP. A type of fixed price contract where the buyer pays the seller a set amount, as defined by the contract, regardless of the seller's costs. Fishbone diagram. See cause and effect diagram. Fixed price contract. An agreement that sets the fee that will be paid for a defined scope of work regardless of the cost or effort to deliver it. Fixed price incentive fee contract, FPIF. A type of contract where the buyer pays the seller a set amount, as defined by the contract, and the seller can earn an additional amount if the seller meets defined performance criteria. Fixed price with economic price adjustment contract, FPEPA. A fixed price contract, but with a special provision allowing for predefined final adjustments to the contract price due to changed conditions, such as inflation changes, or cost increases, or decreases, for specific commodities. Float. Also called slack. See total float and free float. Flowchart. The depiction in a diagram format of the inputs, process actions, and outputs of one or more processes within a system. Focus groups. An elicitation technique that brings together pre-qualified stakeholders and subject matter experts to learn about their expectations and attitudes about a proposed product, service, or result. Forecast. An estimate or prediction of conditions and events in the project's future based on information and knowledge available at the time of the forecast. Forward pass. A critical path method technique for calculating the early start and early finish dates by working forward through the schedule model from the project start date or a given point in time. Free float. The amount of time that a schedule activity can be delayed without delaying the early start date of any successor or violating a schedule constraint. Functional organization. An organizational structure in which staff is grouped by areas of specialization and the project manager has limited authority to assign work and apply resources. Funding limit reconciliation. The process of comparing the planned expenditure of project funds against any limits on the commitment of funds for the project to identify any variances between the funding limits and the planned expenditures. Gantt chart. A bar chart of schedule information where activities are listed on the vertical axis, dates are shown on the horizontal axis, and activity durations are shown as horizontal bars placed according to start and finish dates. Grade. A category or rank used to distinguish items that have the same functional use but do not share the same requirements for quality. Ground rules. Expectations regarding acceptable behavior by project team members. Histogram. A bar chart that shows the graphical representation of numerical data. Historical information. Documents and data on prior projects including project files, records, correspondence, closed contracts, and closed projects. Identify risks. The process of identifying individual risks as well as sources of overall risk and documenting their characteristics. Identify stakeholders. The process of identifying project stakeholders regularly and analyzing and documenting relevant information regarding their interests, involvement, interdependencies, influence, and potential impact on project success. Implement risk responses. The process of implementing agreed upon risk response plans. Imposed date. A fixed date imposed on a schedule activity or schedule milestone, usually in the form of a start no earlier than and finish no later than date. Incentive fee. A set of financial incentives related to cost, schedule, or technical performance of the seller. Incremental life cycle. An adaptive project life cycle in which the deliverable is produced through a series of iterations that successively add functionality within a predetermined time frame. The deliverable contains the necessary and sufficient capability to be considered complete only after the final iteration. Independent estimates. A process of using a third party to obtain and analyze information to support prediction of cost, schedule, or other items.